Good morning and welcome to the 2021 St. Francis Yacht Club Race Committee Kickoff Day. Welcome. It's great to have you all interested in assisting with the race committee. I've been doing race committee for the St. Francis for 20 years or more, and it's a very fulfilling, enjoyable, although sometimes arduous endeavor. So anyway, welcome. We're happy to have you today. Again, my name is John Siegel, and I am going to talk to you today about signal boat operations. So let me share my screen with you. There we have it. So what do we do on the signal boat? We are the central focus for the race committee before, during, and after racing. The expectations of racers are that the signal boat personnel will run proper races for them. That is, safe races and fair races for all competitors. So they all have an opportunity to win the event. We are bound by the racing rules of sailing, which tells us exactly how we must run races, and by best race management practices, which are available in several documents. For example, U.S. Sailing has a race management handbook, which is a wonderful document that talks an awful lot about the best practices for running races. And then we at the St. Francis, over the years, have developed a reputation for running pretty good races, and we have our own protocols in place for that. We as race committee volunteers should be satisfied if at the end of the day, the racers are happy, the race committee is content, and it's been a safe race with no injuries, which is very important. On the race committee signal boat, the person in charge of the race committee is the principal race officer. The principal race officer is invariably on the signal boat. In larger events, we would occasionally have a deputy race officer on board. And in addition to that, we have several other personnel who assist with the various tasks that we have on the signal boat. We have a recorder, and that person is very important. That person jots down basically everything that occurs on there, which turns out to be very necessary in a lot of cases. So we have a very good record of when all races start, who is a premature starter, for example, how many cell numbers did we start for a certain class, et cetera, et cetera. So the recorder has a big job and a very important job. We have a person dedicated to sound signals, that is horns, whistles, shotguns in some cases. We at the St. Francis Yacht Club use an automated starting system that we plug in and press buttons, and it initiates the sound signals for us. We will have a person dedicated to flag signals, and we display various flag signals to represent where we are in races and how we want to communicate with the racers. We might have a spotter who's dedicated to watching that starting line and identifying people who have started prematurely and must come back and restart, for example. And if there are boats that are on the course side or premature starters, we would have a separate signaler typically who would signal that to the racers. And the reason that we would have a separate person doing that is that we want to have this person positioned as far forward on the boat as we can be, so that the racers have an opportunity to visualize that flag signal from their positions across the starting line. And sometimes we'll have a separate person driving the race committee signal boat and anchoring it for us. So we will very often have 5 to 10 individuals on the race committee signal boat. We can probably do most events with as few as 3, but that means we're multitasking And it's much better to have roughly, 5 to 7 or 8 volunteers on the signal boat. So what are some tips for ensuring success? We want to always keep in mind that we are there for the sailors. It's not about us looking important on the signal boat. We have to be timely. We have to be on time because time is of the essence in getting these races off efficiently. We are basically in charge of the other boats that are on the water. That is the mark-set boats and the safety boats and the course marshals, if there are any, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to very clearly indicate to them what we expect and let them carry out their duties without micromanaging every aspect of it. I like to limit verbal communications with the racers. We do want to have a friendly situation, but too much communication is very frustrating to the racers who are trying to focus on having a good start, for example. Staying focused and avoiding distractions is our biggest challenge on the boat. It's not a challenge before the start because we have a lot going on until the start takes place. But after the start, it's very easy to be lulled into a situation where we're not focusing and not keeping an eye on what's happening on the course, and we might miss some very important indicators of which might dictate what we're going to do next. So focus is very important. We want to stay flexible. We want to be prepared to reset the course if necessary. Again, this gets back to the staying focused. We want to continually observe what's going on. We want to observe all wind shifts and try to ascertain whether that's going to be a consistent trend, etc. We want to communicate with our mark-set boats, and typically we'll do that over a private channel radio because we may want to communicate things that we don't want the racers to hear. We use voice recorders on the signal boat so that if we've written down something wrong or we've said something incorrectly, we can go back to the voice recorder and find out exactly what our intent was. We use pens. The recorder always uses pens. We don't erase things. We clearly line through things that are in air and re-record them. And various other things, as you can see on here. And our final aspect is we want to have fun. It really is a very satisfying activity, and we want to have fun on the boat while we're running a very good race for the competitors. So a typical race day for signal boat personnel is, first off, we would attend a race committee meeting, which would be held by the principal race officer. And in that meeting, the race officer will point out things in the sailing instructions that are important for the race committee to keep in mind, identify and communicate weather trends, current trends, and things that could be problematic, give an idea to the mark-set personnel of where we're thinking of setting up the course, et cetera, et cetera. So we do this early in the morning on race day, and we want to leave the dock early to give us the time to be completely prepared when it comes time for the first starting time, which is prescribed in the sailing instructions. And typically we'll leave the dock as early as 90 minutes before the intended warning signal for the first race. We assign boat responsibilities: who's going to be the recorder, who's going to be the timer, who's going to be the line spotter, who's going to take wind checks for us. We want to have the mark-set boats take wind checks for us. That is to say, determine the wind direction and velocity at various locations. So we'll have them go into a position on their boat roughly where we would like to have a mark, and we'll ask them to take wind checks there. And the recorder will very carefully record that for the race officer. And then based on those wind checks and the courses that are available to us, we will make a decision as to what course or courses we're going to run. And then based on that, we'll anchor the signal boat in an appropriate location. We would then ask the mark-set boats to come by, physically come adjacent to the signal boat and ping our GPS location. And this is very important because then we might tell the windward markset boat to move to a position perhaps 0.75 nautical miles at a compass bearing of 235 degrees, for example. So pinging the signal boat is an important activity. We'll then decide on a specific course that we're going to run. We will direct the markset folks to set their marks in the appropriate locations. We'll observe boats sailing in the area and make sure that this course is going to make sense. If there's a shift or if a mark is slightly out of place, we'll have the markset personnel adjust that location. We get all of our flags ready, we get our sound signals ready, and then I like to do a practice sequence. We'll remove the air horn from our sound system, and we'll actually go through the 5-minute system from the warning signal at 5 minutes to the preparatory signal at 4 minutes to the drop of the preparatory signal at 1 minute and to the start. And we'll go through and simulate an actual start, which gets everyone a little bit more comfortable with their roles on the signal boat. Again, the recorder is recording all activity throughout this. And then after the first race, if the boats are finishing adjacent to the signal boat, we will of course record them as they finish. If they're finishing at another location on the race course, we will ask the boat that is responsible for finishing the boats to send us their finish sheets. They'll photograph them, send them to us. We will then review them and send them on to the race office. And the race office will do the scoring for us online, which is very nice for the racers because the racers can theoretically, at least after a race, get on their iPhones and look up the scores and find out exactly where they finished and what they might want to do differently in a subsequent race. And at the end of the day, after all races are complete, we'll pull anchor, return to the dock. We'll post the protest time limit on the official notice board. We'll clean up the boat, put away everything, return the necessary equipment to the dock master and the race office. We will have a formal debrief of all race committee personnel, and then it's time to enjoy the social aspects of post-racing. So that is what typically happens in the course of a typical race day at the St. Francis Yacht Club, and how we take care of matters on the race committee signal boat. Thank you very much for your attention.